So I'm going to start off with the Israeli air phase, let's say. Again, guys, super informal. We're literally just clowning around with counters. We are not even trying to call this any kind of an actual official game. So the only air units I'm going to bring in, I'm just going to go ahead and do it, are my 4 Israeli F-16 Fighting Falcons. The Syrian's going to go ahead and commit his 3 aircraft to try and interdict. Okay, no problem. He doesn't have to do that, but just for gaming purposes, we're going to go ahead and say that he will. The range on these laser-guided bombs is 6. So the F-16s have to get within 6 hexes of their unit, or of their target, before they release their ordnance. One, two, three, four, five, 6. Now, in case you're watching, here's where you have to get very careful about how you're approaching targets. I know in a lot of games, when you're calling in an airstrike, you just simply say, hey, I'm calling in an airstrike. I'm attacking this headquarters unit or this anti-aircraft unit or whatever. I'm going to roll the hit and see what happens. The problem is these air units have different possible loadouts, and those loadouts all have different characteristics. And depending on those characteristics, you have to be within a certain amount of range. You have to be a certain distance before you can release them. If these guys were carrying, Mavericks or Hellfires or who knows what, they would be able to fire from a much further distance away. But again, this is 1982, and the Israelis do not have they don't have all the neat toys. They have to buy a lot of their gear from the Americans still, and the Americans aren't going to give them like the very best stuff. So they have to use laser-guided bombs. These are basically pave-penny laser-guided bombs that are coming in. In a super technical game, you would not be able to fire laser-guided bombs until you had at least 1 infantry unit with a line of sight on the target. Basically, the infantry unit has to designate the target with a laser. You have to paint the target with a laser before a laser-guided bomb can pick it up. We might work that into future editions of this expansion. We were literally creating this yesterday after our podcast and a little bit this morning. I don't think the Toshash Miniatures edition of Panzer Leader, that's Tactical Combat Middle East, has rules for that, a laser designation, but we could definitely work it in there. It would make them a little less powerful, which might be a good thing, because laser-guided bombs are no joke. They are equal opportunity ass kickers. They will blow up a tank just as easily as infantry. Almost no weapon in the game does that. Most weapons in this game have to either deal with hard targets or soft targets. Laser-guided bomb is one of the few ones that can do both. The only problem is that they are still technically free-fall weapons, so they have to go in there and you have to get pretty close to use them. So the Israelis are coming on. They're going to put 2 planes here on the air defense. They want to try and knock out some of the air defense. That's this guy's going to go after the Shilka. This guy's going to go after the SA-6 Gainful. Surface-to-air missile battery. And these 2 guys, they're going to put 2 laser-guided bombs on these lead T-72s. Probably not the best use of my air power, but again, we're just testing out the system and trying to have some fun. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to fire from maximum distance away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, cool. I'm going to choose a little bit of a different flight path. It's at the top of the map. They're going to release from as far north as they can. And the reason being is because if I zoom out a little bit, guys, what you're going to see is not only do you have, so there are the targets. Okay, not only do they have to attack from within a certain distance of those targets, but wherever they're releasing their ordnance, those aircraft are for that split second assumed to be in that hex. Of course, they're way up high, but they're considered to be over those hexes. That means they might take ground fire from all these other units. So if I decided to come in from the northeast, I'm coming in here from the north because I'm trying to avoid as much of this flak as I possibly can. I'm going to have enough trouble with that Shilka and with those SA-6s. I don't need a whole bunch of 50 caliber fire coming from the roofs of these T-62s and T-72s as well. If, for example, I was coming in from the southeast, or I'm sorry, from the southwest, even if I'm within 6 hexes, come on, man. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can release from there. I'm in the midst of all this mess. And what's going to happen is all these guys are going to get opportunity fire and try and shoot down that F-16, or at least drive it away. Again, there's no rule. You can do whatever you want. And the best thing about games like this is it doesn't enforce any kind of a rule. You have to attack from certain directions or whatever. It's you're going to try doing it the wrong way once. And you're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to ever do that again. Before you know it, you're making the same decisions, vicariously, of course, that real-life commanders have to make on the battlefield. The problem is the game has to be realistic enough for that emergent property to kind of manifest. So the Israelis have declared their airstrikes. That's what they're going after. No problem. Now the Syrians are going to say, they have the option. They say, are we going to invest our aircraft for anti-air, or are we going to invest our aircraft, are we going to reserve our aircraft for trying to hit Israeli targets later? Again, just to kind of show how the game works, this is probably the wrong decision. We're going to go ahead and we are going to engage these F-16s. And we're going to engage these F-16s from way over here somewhere. Again, the range on these things are ridiculous. I don't want to be anywhere near any ground fire from any of these guys. So, we have 3 MiG-23 floggers that are coming in, and they're going to use all of their air-to-air missile strikes. They each carry one of these. That's 25 points. Air-to-air missile is the class, and they have a range of 50 hexes, so they can shoot from pretty much anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and use all 3 of those, and I'm going to try to attack one F-16. So we have 75 total attack factors. Here's where the F-16 is going to show how awesome it is. If these missiles were going after a MiG-23 or a similarly, crappy plane, the MiG-23 has a defense of 74. You divide the total number of attack factors by the total defense, you're going to get 3 to 1. And that's the odds column that you roll your dice on. The better the odds column, the more chances you have of killing something. Okay, great. But because of that subtle difference, where the Israeli F-16s have a defense of 30, okay, now that 75 divided by 30 is only 2 to 1. You can't squeeze 3 30s into 75, obviously. And what kind of difference does that make? Let me zoom out a little bit. Well, now, instead, so here's your chance on a, here's a combat results table. You have to roll a 1 through 6 on a D6, obviously. The table goes below 0 and above 6 because there's modifiers that can have you roll crazy results. But what we're really worried about here is the 1 through 6 rows. On 2 to 1, I only kill on a 1. At 3 to 1, I kill on a 1 or a 2. X is equal to kill. Okay? So just that little bit of a difference in that 30 to 24 defense factor means that this combined missile strike, an F-16 is twice as likely to survive as a MiG-23. So, just for fun, we're going to go ahead and roll all those Syrian MiG-23s are firing all of their air-to-air missiles. I can't remember the name of the short-range air-to-air missile that the Soviets were using in 1982 at the time. I'll have to look it up later. They're all firing at those F-16, F-16s, going after those Syrian T-62s, T-72s. So they're on the 2 to 1 table. Again, 75 is the total attack strength, 25 times 3. And a 1 kills it outright. A DD or a DD is basically, D is dispersal, is a pin in other language. Okay, you can't really pin an aircraft. But the way this is usually resolved is if you roll a double dispersal, the aircraft is driven off and it has to return to base. Okay, it's removed from the game. It never gets to release its ordnance. However, it is not counted as a kill for victory purposes. A disperse unit means that it does not get to release its ordnance, but it's driven off the board for this turn. But he can come back next turn. He basically has to evade the missile. He's going to come back around and he's going to strike some, later on in the game. A dash means a straight out miss. So this F-16 is in a lot of trouble. A lot of little red indicator lights just lit up on this in this F-16's cockpit. And we roll a D6 real quick. We are looking at a result of 2. Low rolls are good in this game. So this Syrian actually did pretty well. Unfortunately, because he's an F-16, he survived. A 2 on the 2-to-1 odds table. This is actually a perfect result here for demonstration purposes. I rolled a 2. On the 2-to-1 table is a strong pin, basically. The 2 Ds. It's a double dispersal. That means that plane is going to have to jettison all of his ordnance in order for maximum maneuverability. He fires off all of his countermeasures. He barely manages to evade the missile, and he's going to have to return to base. He does not count as a kill. Okay? Notice, if that F-16 Fighting Falcon had a defense of 24 as the MiG-23s do, on the 3-to-1 table, that's a kill. That little bit of 1980s American electronics just saved that pilot's life. Okay, we're not done yet. Unfortunately, we do have some more problems. We have 24 from the ZSU-23-4 Shilka. That's going to be straight out 4,200 rounds per minute, 70 shells a second of 23mm automatic cannon. That's a very, very, very large bullet. It's a light cannon, basically. But it's firing 70 shells a second, radar guided, straight up at those F-16s. The Syrians are not playing around when it comes to air defense, as well as SA-6 gainful anti-aircraft SAMs. But we got 24 here for the Shilka, and we got 24 for the SAM. So we got a grand total of 48. Again, this would be a 2-to-1 hit against a MiG-21 or a MiG-23 or earlier Israeli aircraft like the Mirage we see in 1967 and 73. The F-4 Phantom doesn't have the same electronics as the F-16 does. Those planes all have like 24 defense factors. You go back into the 1956 war or 67 war, you see Egyptians running around with MiG-17s. These go as low as 18 defense factor. They're much easier to shoot down. But these F-16s are packed full of the best electronic gear. And again, in 1980s, it's not about armor, it's about electronics. No armor in the world will save you from 1980s weapons. It's all about, does the enemy see you? And can he hit you? And can he get through your electronic countermeasures? So, 48 against 30. That's only 1-to-1. And this time the Syrians roll a 4. So a 4 on the 1-to-1 table equals a dash. Basically no effect, it's a miss. Now what the Assyrians could have done is said, because I'm pretty crappy, I could take 2 chances at 1-to-2. I could put 24 Shilka points against one F-16. I could put 24 SAM-6 points against the other F-16, maybe try to drive them both off, maybe have 2 chances or whatever instead of 1 chance. That's what they picked, and they basically missed. So that air defense fire went off, and the F-16s evaded it. Now the Israelis have survived the air defense of the Syrians. Super fast. Okay, I got 1 laser-guided bomb strike that is going to be a range of 6 and an attack of 30. An attack of 30 against armored targets. So I find here on this is the weapons effectiveness chart that was posted on Beasts of War literally about an hour ago. That's how new it is, folks. Laser-guided bomb against an armored target is normal. Alright, so there's no modifiers there. Awesome. So we've got 2 30-point strikes against these 2 targets. Oh my lord. These are built on like PT-76 light amphibious tank chassis. So these vehicles are not meant for tank-to-tank combat. They only have a defense of 4, and they're being struck by a 30-point missile strike. So how many times does 4 go into 30? The answer is 7. We look over on our chart, and we do have a 7-to-1 table. Even a 6 on 7-to-1 will kill you. So the worst roll the Israelis can get will still kill these ground targets. The reason they even have a 7-to-1 table is, again, you can, like, if this guy was smart, if he was in woods, if that SA6 was in woods, I have to add 1 to my die roll for the woods. If he's in a town, if he's in some kind of cover, if he's got a smoke screen, who knows what. As it is, he's sitting there in the open, and so he gets no defensive modifiers. Basically, it's a diceless kill. The Israelis are able to take out both of those targets without even picking up the dice. And those are both technically armored targets. Armored targets do produce rec counters. And the rec counter we'll get into a little bit later. Like what a rec counter does. Basically, a rec counter is clutter. It makes the board look awesome, but what it really does is it clogs up a hex. It affects stacking in the hex. You're only allowed to have so many units in a hex, and a rec counter counts as a unit for stacking purposes. Now, this other F-16 is going to fire his 30-point laser-guided bomb at one of these T-72s. He's not going to do very much damage there because it's 30 points against 18. That's going to be 1-to-1 odds. He gets a 4. That's a straight out miss. That's unfortunate. Okay, so we still have 3 F-16s in the area. They've now dropped all their ground ordnance. They got 2 hits and a miss. The good news is they still have air-to-air ordnance, which might come in useful if these MiGs decide to get cute next turn and drop some of their guided missiles on our Israeli tanks. Okay, now that air defense is taken out, these helicopters can breathe a little bit easier.